Welcome to the Be a Brilliant Human podcast. You're in the right place if you're a growth-seeking being who acknowledges the challenges and delights of your humanity on the path to an ever more conscious life. If you want to feel inspired to love and accept yourself, to feel free to be and express you in all your brilliance, if you want to truly value yourself and others and feel energized and alive both at home and in the world, then sit back and take a breath as you explore and grow the brilliance of your beautiful human self with your host, the father of non-personal awareness and creator of the MPA process, Joel Young.
Hello, and welcome to the Be a Brilliant Human podcast with me, Joel Young. I'm so delighted you're here. If you're just turning up for the first time, hurrah, welcome, brand new person. And if you're back again, as you know, I always love to say, and it's always true for me, that I so love and appreciate that you come back time and again. Now, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button so that you can get notified when these things go live. And you know what? If you've made it through the intro, so to speak, which tells you that we're all about growth-seeking beings, that tells me that you are a growth-seeking being. And if that's what you're into, then make sure you go ahead and download the MPA process sheet. You can do it for free. You can go to www.npa, that's November Papa Alpha 4.me/MPA sheet, or you can just visit the Be a Brilliant Human podcast website, which is www.beabrillianthuman.com, and you'll find links there. And the MPA process, in case, again, you're new to me here, is a very simple way to stop taking things personally. It helps you let go of the yucky stuff, let in the yummy stuff of life. There are literally thousands of people around the world using it to improve their lives. If you think about not taking things personally, mostly it's about dealing with other people's criticism. If you find you get hurt by what other people say, that's definitely a place to start. But actually much deeper than that, when you stop taking things personally, it means that the stuff of life doesn't stick to you. And that's a wonderful thing because you're free then to navigate the stuff of life, really. All right, so today we're going to be talking about mastery. It's really why mastery matters and how to achieve it. So I'm going to give you my spin on that whole topic, and I'll tell you what inspired me to this topic in a moment. But I would love to start because I got the most amazing story. It was actually on somebody's Facebook page, and she's called Dr. Galara Vincent, and she's a healer who empowers women to transform their relationships. And she's a long-standing member of the MPA community, and she's done many of the trainings with me, including the basic training, which you can get online, or the advanced training as well. And she did a post which was a story about how she used MPA with her kids and her family. And I'd love to read it to you because it's such a great story and an illustration of what's possible. So here's what she says. She says, like many parents in lockdown, I'm doing my best to homeschool my kids. Now, given that the majority of their assignments are on their tablets, they have a lot of screen time. They stare at their homework and then when they had enough, they want to watch TV. So I've been trying to limit the screen time. I'd much rather they run around outdoors, but it's created a lot of tension with my son. A few days ago, once again, we locked horns and he was saying, I want to watch TV, I want to watch TV, I want to watch TV. And he chanted, in the full knowledge that I'd say no. In fact, part of the conflict was fueled by his expectation that the answer is no. So he quadrupled his efforts to get what he wants. I decided it was time to change this pattern, says Galara. So she says, okay, you can watch TV, but please humor me and do something first. And she explains, in my healing practice, I use a technique called non-personal awareness, created by the amazing Joel Young. Thank you very much, Galara. It's 6 simple lines you say to remove a charge from your body or a situation. Great way to describe it. My son has used it in the past when he had pains and aches. So when I explained what I wanted him to do, he willingly ran, I want to watch TV through the sequence. My 5-year-old chimed in and they were both so cute that all the tension between us dissipated. And guess what, she says, I haven't heard that chant since. Yes, they watch TV, but it's not excessive and there's no unreasonable demands. So I love that story. I love here. I get feedback all the time from people who are using MPA in ways that I never expected. So again, if you're curious about the process itself, you can go to the Be a Brilliant Human podcast. You can go to my main website, joelyoungnpa.com. Or use that short URL, which is npa4.me/MPA sheet, and you can download the MPA sheet for free for yourself. All right, so today, mastery. Why am I talking about mastery? Okay, so here's the backstory of every week I kind of think, what am I going to talk about in the podcast? What's going to serve people, what's going on in the world? And sometimes it's just what's going on in my world. So, so here's what happened is, okay, I need to go back a bit before. If you haven't listened to this before, then you probably don't know that my history is as a musician. I started playing guitar when I was 8 years old. I started writing songs about the same time, had a band, was sort of moderately to sort of slightly successful with the band that I had, and we toured and all that kind of thing. So music has always been something that I do. And, even though I really made the career choice of doing what I do now, working with people and facilitating change and transformation, working one-to-one and in groups, it's always been part of my life. But the last few years, I haven't done so much of the music recording. Now, in the lockdown situation that we've been in a sense, I've sort of gained that extra time, and I have hobbies of photography, which I'll talk about in a bit, but also music. And it's got me back into recording music. And part of the thing that I tend to do as a growth-seeking being and someone who loves to learn is I use YouTube. So I've been watching these production videos. These are music producers and engineers who are literally masters of their craft. And it really struck me as I listened to it, because I'm pretty good. I've certainly, in a sense, mastered the guitar, although I'm relatively out of practice. But I've done enough time, enough years, and there's enough passion in me that I've mastered it. And I've had a good go at recording. I do okay. But when you listen to these guys talking, there are some things that you really notice. And it reminded me of one of those sort of factors within mastery, which is, when you get to a certain level, there are nuances which seem minute. There are sort of subtleties that you become very highly attuned to. So this guy that I'm thinking of in particular was talking about, serial compression, which is a way to sort of squash a signal and make it louder, but to keep it clear. And he was doing examples, and his ear was so obviously tuned in that if I just listened to something, I wouldn't notice the difference. But the fact was that he was really keyed into those subtleties, and those subtleties do make the difference. The difference between a production I do, which sounds good to most people's ear, versus, a professionally mastered and produced sort of piece of music, where there's that other level, and the differences are in those subtleties. And to become attuned to and to be really, really amazing at working with those subtleties is a function of mastery. So they have these trained ears is what got me. And that got me thinking, that's a really good topic to talk about, because there's that sort of, master of something, jack of all trades, those kind of thoughts. And I think it's a really interesting topic to open up about, where you choose to place your mastery. In a sense, there's sort of two sides to this podcast today. It's kind of, what you choose to master is one part. And of course, we're going to talk about, the background of that. And then I want to sort of give some of my ideas and some other people's ideas about how to sort of really go for the mastery. But also, I think there's another aspect of it, which I want to raise, which is when it comes to getting support and help and mentorship, I think it's really important to choose masters. You can get the blind leading the blind is a non-master teaching a non-master. I mean, I'm not knocking it completely, and I will go into that. But I think it's really important to be able to spot the hallmarks of a master. So if you choose to get help or coaching or those kind of things, you can really get a sense that if you have a master, you might pay more for them or whatever. But it is that the differences made on the surface seem subtle, but the difference is enormous. All right, so let's talk a little bit about, that's why mastery is important. Okay, so why does mastery even matter? Well, I thought about this. It's an interesting thing. And when I really sort of sat with, why does it matter? I think for me, there's a very strong link between mastery and fulfillment. And fulfillment is one of those things which is one of the richnesses, if that's a word, of the human experience. I think when you come to a place where you can master something, you get a sense not only of emotional fulfillment, of that sense of being able to do something in a way which is sort of aligned with the divine almost. Because I think once you come to mastery, you're really in the zone, which is another way to say that is to be aligned with the divine, like just channeling it straight through and having those subtleties and nuances. It's a magical feeling. And I also think you get a sense of fulfillment in terms of your purpose. I'm going to explain that one a bit more as we go forward when we get into the how, because I think that the mastery you choose is directly linked to some deep sort of primal sense of purpose. And I think the other side of it, where this is again about choice and career, I think often if you choose a career in an area where you have passion and then you can come into mastery, that's where you get into a place where in many cases you can see financial rewards for that, which again, it's like a positive spiral of the emotional sense of purpose and financial or even status is part of that, the sense of fulfillment. So I think part of the reason why sort of really choosing to master something has positive comebacks into your life is because it's going to feel great. There's a wholeness about it as you reach mastery. It's like you're then the bird coming out of the nest. I'm reminded at this time of year when all the little chicks are starting to fly the nest. It's that feeling of just spreading your wings and you can just do this, and you can do it without challenge, without difficulty. It's just there. And again, I say without challenge, and part of my brain goes, well, there's always going to be more. There's always going to be things that challenging is part of the thing. Overcoming challenges in a way is part of mastery. Doing it masterfully rather than stumbling through it as a beginner. So I think that's my main sense about why mastery really matters. Is because it links directly to your sense of fulfillment. And also, because I said there's the other side of it, it matters in terms of in terms of who you choose to help you in certain places. I think that's another area where it matters. And one of the areas that I see this actually is in my industry, if you like, is in the world of complementary therapists and practitioners and those kind of things. And I think it's one of those things where there's a distinction between I would say a hobbyist and a professional. Generally professionals are more inclined to mastery. Why? Because it's their day job, right? So for me, this is my day job. It's each aspect of it might take time to master. Like I'm still working on the, podcast delivery and working on that. But certainly in the realm of one-to-one facilitation, I really feel that I'm in a state of mastery. It's effortless for me. I don't have any sense of resistance. It brings me energy. There's nothing that I feel that I can't sort of handle. Again, I'm not saying there's never going to be any kind of challenges, but I feel a sense of mastery, and part of that is not just my commitment and practice over time, but it's my job. It's what I do day in, day out. In the same way, going back to the music production, I don't do that day in, day out. I love it and I learn about it, but I don't do it enough to be able to say with any kind of anything other than total arrogance and self-denial that I'd mastered that. Not at all. But in this area, absolutely. And again, I would come back to the fact that if you choose to go to a hobbyist to help you with transformation. One thing I want to make absolutely clear, I'm not saying that hobbyists don't do great work. I do great stuff on music. I do great stuff with photography. But where the difference is those subtleties and nuances and experiences. And those little things, which again are not necessarily immediately noticeable, can make all the difference in actually the depth, the profundity, the sustainability of change. And it's much more in terms of what's the word, possibilities, or I'm trying to think of the betting one. what's the odds? There we are. I found the word. The odds are much more in your favor that you're going to get a really spectacular result versus a hobbyist. And again, I want to make this absolutely clear. I don't want to offend people who do it, part-time. They've got a day job they have to keep. That's all part of the greatness of on the way to mastery. I just think it's important to be alive to or aware of the distinction that's at play there. And again, if I look at my other hobby, photography, it's one of those things where if I look online, I'm in many online groups for wildlife photography, that's my jam. I can see, I could put some pictures up just this week of I took a day off last Friday because the lockdown restrictions have been reduced. I was able to drive a decent amount of time. So I went over towards Liverpool where there's a nature reserve that I absolutely love. And I've not been out to somewhere different for whatever the last 8 weeks. It was an absolute joy. And one of the things that was happening there were swifts flying around. Some of them would like whip past my head about a foot away from me. And for many, many years, I've tried to capture swifts, house martins, and swallows in flight with really very, very poor results. But the last year, I've really done so much more. I spent more time, more learning, and learning techniques with photography that I actually got some really good shots of these swifts in flight, including one about to capture a bug. Now, these are pretty good shots, and on the groups, they've had a great response. But I look at them, and then there's a few other guys that are in those groups, and they're clearly professionals. Like these guys are at a level of mastery that I can recognize is way beyond mine. So I'll look at those ones and go, on one hand, most people will look at my photos and go, they're great, and I'm not knocking them, they're really good photos. But there's something about those professional guys that they just get the framing just so right, the crispness of the photograph. There's shots in there that I absolutely aspire to, and that's because they've achieved a level of mastery at this point that I just haven't. So in a way, that's the distinction. And what does that do? Well, in terms of photography, there's just something in terms of the wow factor that you get from one of those professional shots. Yes, my shots have been delightful for people to see and all the rest of it, and I'm not trying to knock that. But what I am saying is, what is the energetic impact of that mastery? When you see someone like a professional, amazing photograph that's just off the scale, evident in its mastery, this is my experience, but it may be maybe it might not be photography for you or wildlife photography, but for me, it's like it moves my spirit. It touches me on some deeper level, because let's think about it. Those subtleties and nuances, if you think about the subtle energy field around the body, all the different amazing sort of unconscious or subtle things that are happening within our system, this is the realm of our spirit. It really moves. So those energetic nuances, that the sort of the homeopathic impact, if you like, of mastery is truly, truly profound. So, okay, so that's enough about the why. Why is it important? That's my case. I've made my case, Your Honor. So I think let's start looking at some practical stuff, and I'll give you some ideas of, what you're going to choose when it comes to mastery and how you go about, that journey to mastery. So how do you achieve mastery? Well, I think for me, my view is that there's a combination of things. I think there has to be passion. Clearly, there needs to be practice, and there has to be some kind of commitment, and that has to happen over time. I don't think there's a shortcut. We're not like in the Matrix here, where you can just download Kung Fu. I know Kung Fu. We're not there yet, folks. So it's good old-fashioned practice. And I think passion is important as part of to pull you through the challenging times of it. And of course, that again takes commitment. I think the other piece of the equation is that you need to have training, preferably some kind of mentor or coach. I think are really vital parts of coming into that sort of level of mastery. And there's actually a book by a guy called Robert Greene, literally called Mastery. And he puts it really well. And I want to sort of talk about a couple of his points. One of the things when it comes to the passion aspect of mastery, I think, and this is where it comes to choosing what you put the time and effort into, is he talks about how it's important to look for what is your primal curiosity. That's the term he uses. And he describes it this way. He says that, early on, often in childhood, you have this, you can identify things that you are just naturally curious and passionate about. And often what happens, of course, is our society is set up that we get put into the industrial age invention called school, where your curiosity is pretty much flattened out of you for the most part. And if your passions are a bit quirky or don't fit the curriculum, then, WTF, what are you doing, little child? Go ignore that and do something that is on the curriculum. So you can investigate what are your primal curiosities. He actually suggests that you journal around the question, what were you naturally curious about when you were very young? And he talks about how when you find that, it'll give you the clues, and it might seem like a strange thing. So there's I forget her name right now, but he talks about someone who became a very famous robotics engineer. And she was always fascinated by her hand when she was a child. It seems like a strange thing, but she was always fascinated by her hand and how the brain makes the hand move. She kind of forgets that, but goes into college and university, ends up choosing engineering, and then shares with her tutor that she's always had this strange dream of, her other passion was tennis, of making a robot that could play tennis with her. So she ends up being invited into the robotics thing and starts to study hands. So she comes up with this amazing, and one of the most amazing robotic hands that the human race so far has managed to do. And then, because she was always fascinated also by how the brain makes the hand move in humans, she went and did another doctorate on neurobiology, and then she merged them together. So she developed this whole new area, which is obviously her mastery, called neurobiotics. But it all started when, in a sense, you can follow the line, because that weird primal curiosity was, that's my hand. How strange. I'm really fascinated by why it's that way and how it works. And from that, in a way, that lent her to coming into her specific mastery around neurobiotics and creating robot hands. Amazing. So when I was a kid, I was always fascinated. I was fascinated by butterflies. I'd sit and watch them. There was that curiosity, that primal curiosity about nature, and that's translated into my photography. And then I was fascinated with music as well. Again, that was something that I followed with a passion. I thought that would be my career, like full time, as part of it. And then the human stuff was, if I marry the things together, it's human nature and harmony. It amazes me. I was thinking about, how I've ended up, working with people to help transform their lives. I've always been fascinated by conflict in a way, and resolving conflict. And as I came through it, and why humans do what they do, because I always had this observer. I would watch humans and go, we're really weird. And one of my core things is unnecessary suffering. That's something that I, at the core of a lot of my work is to help people, let go of unnecessary suffering. And I would see ways that people were suffering unnecessarily, and it was a fascination for me from very, very early on. So, and that's translated, and then the harmony thing relates to the music, and nature relates to, we are a part of nature. So all kind of conspired together to fuel sort of this wonderful passion to work with people. And to me, in many ways, again, the way that I look at transformation in general, it's about resolving conflict, inner conflict, external conflict, to create harmony. And from harmony, you're in that zone, and from in that zone, magic happens, and things resolve themselves all by themselves, as I say with MPA. So your primal curiosity is a really good place to start, to look, go back to when you were really young. What were the things that you were just naturally, before the social conditioning kicked in, right? What were you naturally curious about? And the other thing that Robert Greene talks about as sort of one of the really important factors, which I've already mentioned, is learning. The way he puts it is learning above all else. And his thought here, and I think there's some truth in it, although I'm not a big fan of the word sacrifice, which is the word he uses, is often a sacrifice. Now, he's talking about it in terms of like you might have to sacrifice your pay level early on with rewards later because you put learning above pay. So if you think about like apprenticeship schemes, those are a good example of where, you know, you get paid like minimum wage, whatever, but the trade-off there is that you are learning to master the craft. That's where apprenticeship comes from. I mean, I've got an example of this where I did this quite consciously. So back in about, oh gosh, I'm going to think, well, when did MPA come out? 2007. So it would have been about 2006 to 2008. One of the things that I wanted to do was to do satsang. If you haven't heard of satsang before, it's a very kind of sort of spiritual approach. I mean, all of the gurus who sit on their chairs in their white sheets and people ask questions and they go, well, that's not who you are. That's satsang. But I had a passion for it back then, and I wanted to sort of offer it, but I recognized that there was probably, while I had a lot of experience with satsang, I hadn't really been sort of front of room satsang. So I made a commitment to organize many satsangs, and I would travel around the country. And my commitment to myself was I would show up even if nobody else did. I would show up if one person did. And in a sense, in there was my commitment and passion that said, really, I understand that this is about practicing, learning, sort of learning the craft, really, which is, you know, everything is ultimately a craft if you think about it. So that was where, in a way, I can see what he's speaking to, because I was very willing to go and drive, and it would, you know, cost me money to drive miles here, miles there, with rooms of one person, you know, 10 people, 4 people, and that wasn't my motivation. My motivation was just to practice it, just to go and do it, to be the expression of it. And in that time, I learned a hell of a lot, not only about just the art of holding space with people, intimate space, and sort of working with the dynamics of questions and spiritual, spiritual inquiry, and that was part of what's informed the mastery of what I do now. So I think there's some truth in putting motivation first, really, or putting education first as part of it. And I think also one of the things in the commitment aspect of it, if you go back to episode 31, actually, I did an episode about staying motivated in lockdown. And I talked about how, you know, sometimes when you're in a space of committed to something, but things get tough, it's important to sort of find your why. And in a sense, the primal curiosity is a why. And I think it's important, really, if you're going to choose to go down the path of mastery. I'm not going to say mastery is easy. It does take a lot of time and commitment. Then finding your why finding your why dynamically through the process is a really important thing. So do you go back and check episode 31 if that's something where you feel like sometimes you get a bit stuck. And the last point I want to make, which is outside of what Robert Greene said, although I didn't notice him saying it in particular, but is often mastery is not about the fancy stuff, the sort of high end, the technical stuff. It's about the basics. I think when you find a master, what they have done is they have absolutely drilled the basics. And I think that's really important. It's like, so principles are important to really understand the underlying principles of what it is you're mastering. And then there will always be basic techniques, like say in golf, another random example, but I play golf. I'm definitely not a master. But golf masters, what do? They go out, they put the ball on the ground, and they hit it again and again and again. And they have to master connecting the shoe of the club, I think it's called a shoe, see how much mastery I've got in golf, connecting it with the ball perfectly again and again and again. And then not just hitting it so it hits it nicely, but knowing when to hit it to make it spin so it can roll back to the side, so they can make it bend left, make it bend right. But the basic thing is hitting that ball sweetly. which means you have to master the swing. And I think whatever the realm you're working in, there are basics that are the foundation. Only when the basics are mastered, then all the extra stuff that becomes gravy. That becomes just the nice stuff on top. But mastering the basics, I think, is one of the most important things. Back to our music production engineers. They've mastered the art of training their ear to the subtleties, and they know the difference and the basics of where to put microphones to get the sound they want to record a particular instrument, how to work with the sounds to make them fit within the overall structure of the song. Things called like EQing, compression, high pass filters. But those are in music engineering. Those are fundamentals that mean you can get the stereo sound. Everything sounds clear and separated. People who are not masters, and I go back to some of my stuff that I've done before, it can sound a bit muddy because I hadn't mastered those particular areas. So it's really important to do the basics. And you can't master something, and you can't master the basics by half-arsing it. You just can't, folks. I'm sorry. It's not what we want to hear. But you kind of have to go all in. And you have to drill it. You have to do it again, day in, day out. That's why I say the difference often between a professional and a hobbyist. It's no slur on the talent of the hobbyist. It's just that when you do it all the time, mastery is kind of an automatic function that comes out of that, really. So I think that gives you an idea of what's in it. Again, there's so many different things that you could choose to master. I think my biggest encouragement here is to choose what you want to master. Go back to your to your primal passions or primal curiosities. For the most part, and I've no evidence for this, it's more of a kind of intuitive thing. I think we for the most part, we tend to end up doing things daily or doing things in our life that are a reflection of those primal curiosities. And even if the job we do doesn't seem to quite fit, somehow that primal curiosity can seep into how we approach what we do. So and the great gift of coming into awareness of that is that if you really lean into that primal curiosity with your mastery, you can actually carve out your expertise in whatever job or whatever the thing is that you're doing, and then come into mastery in the new way. Again, that's why I like the example of the robotics lady, because in a way she created her own niche by combining the neurological aspects with the robotic aspects, and was in that position of mastery. So any job that you're in, if you bring the essence of your primal curiosity into it and the practice and become a master in that way, you might find that what you have is a really amazing, unique expression of you through whatever that job or pastime it is that you do. And that, in a sense, is the essence of mastery. And the last thing I think is that as I was thinking about this, I realized that the way that I've set up the MPA trainings are very much on the principles of mastery. If you look at, as I said at the top of this episode, you can download the MPA sheet for free. That gives you the words to the MPA process, which you can play with and use. But it's like I can give you a golf club, There you go, free golf club. Doesn't mean you're going to necessarily use it well. I'm sure you can hit a ball, and that may be effective. And some people may be more talented than others, or have some transferable skills, which may or may not be helpful. But that's why I offer the basic training, which gives you those core skills. That is the thing to master, the basic training. That gives you really the outline of what are the core principles of doing the process with yourself and other people. So it starts there. And then if you move forward with MPA, you'll come into advanced training. In the advanced training, I start to look at those underlying principles in a deeper way and start to look at the more practical applications of it. So you get into really not just doing it, but understanding what you're doing, why you're doing it. And then another part of the advanced training is really, applying it here, applying it there, applying it with with behaviors, with emotions, applying it with what else do I cover? I should know this off pat. behaviors, of course, with sex, birth, and death, with other modalities. So this is the level where you're coming into with advanced training. You're getting into mastery where you can use it in different contexts. In the same way, I'm going to use another sporting analogy with skiing. You start off, you go in the nursery slopes, but then you need to move up to the blue one, the red one, and then the black one, so you can go down anywhere on the mountain. In advanced training, you're learning different landscapes, to cross my metaphors here. And then ultimately you might come to practitioners training, which I'll be launching later this year. And that's where you're going to drill the absolute crap out of MPA and really, again, working, as I say, with a trainer to really nuance and understand and come into that level where you can understand the subtleties and the nuances of using MPA, and also where you begin to apply those deeper principles into your life, so that literally you will, just like I said, I don't have resistant clients. When you come to practitioner training, what you will learn is, why is that possible? How is that possible? And it's a function of the non-personal energy, and you'll be drilling it and practicing so that you will never have resistant clients again. I know it's a bold claim, but there's a whole mindset around it. So in a way, you're following the path of mastery. If you want to master MPA, there's a natural laid out path. And then beyond that, of course, there's teaching MPA, which you can only do, again, if you're certified teacher training. But again, you need to master the previous steps before you're ready to teach it and pass it on to others. So that's my take on mastery, my lovely friend. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I've enjoyed it. I love the idea of being inspired by primal curiosity. It makes sense to me. I love that this episode came on the back of listening to a music production video. Who knew? Again, if you like this episode, please tell someone. If you like this podcast, go and tell somebody. Say to them, hey, I listened to this podcast, this episode or a previous episode. Tell them to come find it. You can find it on all the usual podcast platforms. Just search Be a Brilliant Human and it should come up. And of course, you can always go to the website www.beabrillianthuman.com. And for this episode, you're going to put /34 if you want to get to the show notes for this episode. So remember to subscribe. Thanks for being here. I hope to see you next week. And all that remains is to cue the moo.